Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Now, the other side of this, Representative Joe Sestak of Pennsylvania, a legitimate hero in his own right, a former U.S. Navy, 3-star admiral, 31 years. Congressman, very good to have you.
Thanks for having me back, Neil.
You've heard the concerns expressed by critics, even by those president's persuasion, who just don't think doubling down here is the answer. And the money we're committing is the answer, let alone how we're going to raise that money. What say you?
Look, I think the speech tonight was very important. It made very clear, in my mind, that the primary objective is not Afghanistan. It's that safe haven of al-Qaeda that's in Pakistan. And that the sole reason that we need troops in Afghanistan is in order to ensure that we have the ability to leave conditions behind where al-Qaeda may not come back. Do I believe this war should be funded within the budget? Absolutely. I think we should have done that to the Iraq war after 2 years of that conflict. You know, we used to have in the defense budget that came over for Iraq anti-submarine hunting helicopters. I never knew that Iraq had submarines. In short, the only way to do this is to bring into the budget, so we set our priorities of how to pay for this war.
All right, but to that point then, Congressman, you don't mind, there has been talk about, whether it's $30 billion or $40 billion, however this is going to cost, that maybe a war tax is in order, and that largely the wealthy pay for it. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that's the right approach.
And what is?
Say the wealthy pay for it. Well, you could go about it by different means. You know, Neil, that there's $79 billion in tax loopholes given every year to fossil fuel energy companies that can keep their profits overseas and bring them home when they desire.
But you would rather do that kind of, I know what you're saying. You would rather do that kind of stuff than imposing a war tax per se.
Well, a tax might have to be brought up. My point is this: bring it inside the budget and pay for it by either finding programs that should be cut in the prioritization of what our national security overall is, or raise the revenues to do this. This is no longer an emergency that just happened like Hurricane Katrina. This is a conflict that is going to go on, at least in my estimation, 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years?
We should. Yes.
So let me ask you, Congressman, when the president talks about being largely out of there in 3 years, wishful thinking?
3 to 5 years. He did say in his speech that he would take into account conditions on the ground. But you're right. I would have preferred, and I watch closely, that this isn't just a strict timetable that we have. I believe that we did need to have a strategy that was often called an exit strategy, where there are benchmarks for measuring success or failures. Every warrior knows that when you have a strategy, you look at it in a cost-benefit way and continually analyze to see if that strategy is working or not. And if the benefits are less than the cost, you change the strategy or exit to a different type of an approach. The president's statement of facts from the White House before the speech said they would give us measurements of progress, but it wasn't mentioned in it, and I think we need this. Neil, the issue here is that this president has made a very good decision to continue to have a measured increase in troops. He stated very clearly that the objective is al-Qaeda in Pakistan, and you know I was on the ground in Afghanistan early in that war as head of the Navy's anti-terrorism unit. This is no longer about Afghanistan. It's about that safe haven in a nation that's almost a failed state, Pakistan.
Yeah, but you know, Congress, that's what I don't understand. Weapons. I defer to you. You're a genuine war hero. You're a great patriot. But, you know, I'm just looking at this stuff, and I see how these al-Qaeda guys planned, for example, 9/11, right? They did much of it in a hotel room in Germany. And I'm wondering whether you really need a safe haven per se, or whether you could put this together at a Holiday Inn Express, not to be crash in any country. And we're going to an enormous expense in a country that is not too far from being nomadic, and committing these billions of dollars to what end? If the idea is to drive al-Qaeda out and the Taliban to the greater point, to a minimal role, if any, well, even Dan Rather was saying, in this age of electronic pockets, in this internet age, all over the world, they're like cockroaches. They'll pop up elsewhere. So have we thought about that? Have we reasoned and studied that? It appears, and I've said this under the prior administration, of this one, that we haven't.
You pose a great question, and yes, I have sat down with the CIA to walk through this over 8 months ago. The issue is this. What we have is the leadership of al-Qaeda there. And what we have there is a very inhospitable terrain where they're welcomed by the radicalized Taliban. There are 25,000 of them that are in Pakistan. The key is this. When I went on the ground there early in the war, I met with General Hayden, head of the National Security Agency at the time. He said to me in a briefing I needed from him before I went in, he said, Joe, General Franks, head of the Army, as you remember, Neil, at the time, keeps saying that give me some actionable intelligence. General Hayden said, look, if you give me some action, I'll give you some intelligence. The issue is that we know a safe haven should send chills up our spine because that means they can communicate at a time and a means of their choosing. If we don't have some boots on the ground to make them move, to set them off style, the leadership of Al-Qaeda,
maybe you're right, Congressman, and I'm no military expert, but you don't need a safe haven. You need us to a room that a day's in with a couple of guys around a table coming up with the most wacky ideas, including about 8 years ago, boarding some planes with box cutters and ramming them into buildings. It sounded foolish, silly, even stupid at the time, but it worked, didn't it? And it was planned not in some back chamber in some, hut in Afghanistan. A lot of it was done disparately throughout the world. My only point is not to lecture on this subject, but to get a sense about how deep we're getting into something, not only whose cost we don't know, but whose outcome we can't fathom.
But no, I disagree. That even with that operation of 9/11, that although it was executed in other means, the head orders, the approval, the strategic approach to it came from the head in Afghanistan. That is where it is. Does that mean someone can't be a copycat somewhere? No. But that is where the epicenter is, as the President used that phrase tonight. And I believe strongly, again, Neil, what we're sometimes missing in this is Pakistan. If that nation goes under, there's 2,000 scientists in their nuclear weapons program that are trained in the most radical of universities that have access not to the weaponry, but to the radiological material and to the knowledge that Al-Qaeda's leadership left there. That is truly the epicenter. And so that's why I feel the President needs to provide benchmarks to see if this strategy he's proposing, which I think is correct, is one of success or failure by measuring progress. And that is the only part that I think we still need to hear.
Gotcha. Congressman, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.